Chivalry Medieval Warfare has recently received its very first patch from the devs. Notable changes are improved server interfaces, a new crosshair, and the removal of the backhand / magically switching sides. In this vid, we'll go over and examine changes to weapons regarding balance and quickly discuss the effects these changes will have on the game. With no further ado, let's dive right in. Across the board, all melee weapon feints have been given a small cooldown, with two-handed weapons being set to 0.2 seconds and one-handed weapons being set at 0.3 seconds, while all stab feints are now 0.4 seconds. This means that feinting an attack won't instantly return you to an idle state, adding a bit of realism and giving players on the wrong end of feint just a tiny amount of time to react. The North Sword has been balanced out, with its overhead and slash attacks being up to 65 and 55 respectively, both with a 0.35 wind-up time, while its stab has been decreased to 55 from 65 and its wind-up time increased from 0.4 to 0.45. The North Sword's stab, while being its main feature, was simply too fast and too powerful, being able to bring down even moderately armored vanguards in 2 hits, while its other functions simply weren't useful. Bringing down the power of the stab sacrifices some of that unique power in return for some more variety to the weapon, while making sure its fast attack is also not its most powerful. Wielding either the Sword of War or the Longsword one-handed now has a slight debuff. With the Sword of War, the stab wind-up has been increased from 0.45 seconds to 0.5, and its stab damage has been reduced to 60 from 70. The Longsword, however, only gets a stab wind-up increase from 0.45 seconds to 0.5. These changes mean that wielding a hand-and-a-half sword in one hand now comes with a disadvantage, namely the speed and damage of your stab attacks, meaning that a choice can now be made as to which fighting style you prefer for the job at hand. The double axe's overhead wind-up has been decreased from 0.6 seconds to 0.5, giving it a slight speed advantage over its blunt counterpart, the maul, to compensate for its lower damage. My fellow vanguards rejoice, spears have received a damage buff across the board, with the spear and brander stock stab being increased to 60, while the forks is increased to 58. These changes reinforce the long-range jabbing playstyle of the spears. For those of you who, like me, can't stand those dishonorable archers, this news will come as a blessing. For those archers out there, not all is bad, so don't worry your poor dishonorable heads. The draw time for the warbow has been increased from 0.9 seconds to 1.4, and its quiver now only holds 20 arrows for both bodkin and broadheads. The draw time on the longbow has been increased from 0.7 seconds to 1.2. The ammo count has also been brought down to 25 for both bodkin and broadhead. However, both arrow flight speeds have been brought up from 5,500 to 6,500. The short bows only got a nerf this patch, having its draw time increased from 0.5 seconds to 0.9. However, its other values have remained unaltered. On the whole, these changes have given a bit of variety and flavor to each bow, making each more situational rather than pure upgrades over the previous. Starting at the lighter end, we have the light crossbow. The bolt flight speed has been buffed up to 6,500 from 5,500, and its quiver now holds 20 bolts. The crossbow also got a flight speed buff going from 5,500 to 7,500. And the heavy crossbow's flight speed has been significantly pumped up from 6,000 to a massive 8,500. These changes, much like the bows, give a bit of unique flavor to each variety of crossbow and separate them from the bows by giving them a greater advantage to compensate for the longer reload time. Short spear's ammo count has been decreased from 8 to 6, and movement speed is reduced to 70% while reloading. An additional throw time has been added on after a throw has been readied, set to 0.4 seconds. Much the same, javelins have also decreased its ammo count, going from 7 to 5, and with movement speed also reduced to 70% while reloading, with an additional throw time of 0.4 seconds. And finally, the heavy javelin, which has also had its ammo count reduced from 6 to 4. The throw time is now set at 0.5 seconds, and the movement speed is reduced to 60% while reloading. These changes add a bit more realism to the throw and present a risk-reward playstyle to the throwing spear, balancing out their damage and versatility by reducing the amount of spears you have available and making you vulnerable with reduced movement speed after throwing. And that's all she wrote for weapons balance this patch. For more information regarding patch changes, this link will send you to the forum page with the full details from the devs.